largely in partnership with the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce since 1997. And I know there's some of you in the audience that have missed maybe one or two over that time, so I thank you for your faithful attention and validation that this is a very important event to recognize the contributions of women in our community and internationally. Before we get started, it's important that we take a moment to acknowledge that we work and live on the traditional territory, that's not even the hard word to say, of the Adirondcan, Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples as we seek to renew relationship based on understanding and mutual respect. Since the first International Women's Day in 1911, over 1 million people have supported this United Nations initiative. IWD belongs to all groups collectively everywhere. IWD is not a country, it's not a group or an organization. In the words of Gloria Steinem, world-renowned feminist, journalist, and activist, the story of women's struggle for equality belongs to no single feminist nor to any one organization, but to the collective effort of all who care about human rights. And I think that when it became viewed as human rights as opposed to feminism or women's rights, it really has resonance around the world. The international theme for this year's IWD is Let's Build a Gender-Based, Gender-Balanced World. Everyone has a part to play, all the time, everywhere. And I'd like at this point to give a shout out to all the men in the audience. It's absolutely essential. I have two mayors blushing down here in front of me. It's absolutely essential that men value the contributions of their female colleagues. There's an African expression that women hold up half the sky, and the corollary of that is that men hold up the other half. So we absolutely have to value the contributions of both genders. From grassroots activism to worldwide action, we are entering an exciting period of history where the world expects balance. We notice its absence, and we celebrate its presence. One of the privileges of serving as regional chair is that I get to participate in community initiatives, and so many of these demonstrate the kind of priorities that drive our community to be more inclusive. This past Sunday, I attended a Seroptimist of KW Chapter Foundation meeting. It's a new chapter, and it was supported by the well-established group in Cambridge. This is a global volunteer organization that works to improve the lives of women and girls through programs leading to social and economic empowerment. One of their taglines is, to live your dream. Small steps that have a big impact. Balance drives to a better working world. So let's all help create, and anyone balance for better. And Canada's specific theme this year is Women in STEM, and that hashtag is Innovation for Change. Today's panelists have made gains and come distances to traverse from what used to be to the new order, so that every woman and girl can achieve their potential and live their dreams. I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's event, title sponsor BMO Bank of Montreal, silver sponsor Enbridge Gas Inc., operating as Union Gas, bronze sponsor Walter Fady, event sponsor Hefner Lexus and Hefner Toyota and Wilfrid Laurier University, jewelry sponsor Raffi Jewelers, print sponsor Westmount Signs and Printing, and design sponsor Leslie Warren Design Group for supporting this morning's breakfast, as well as the Inn of Waterloo for hosting us. Feel free to applaud. Before the official program begins, I would like to recognize the dignitaries in attendance today. I know how busy all of you are, and I appreciate the fact that you've made this a priority to be here. And it wasn't just about the hot breakfast, right? MPP Catherine Fife, thank you for joining us. Regional Councillors Elizabeth Clark and Jim Erb. City of Kitchener Mayor Barry Verbanovich. City of Waterloo Mayor Dave Jaworski. Township of Woolwich Mayor Sandy Shantz. Township of North Dumfries Sue Foxton. Chief Brian Larkin is with us, Councillor from the City of Kitchener, Margaret Johnson, and from the City of Waterloo, Councillors Angela Veith, Jen Bassick, Royce Bottling, Sandra Hamner, Tennille Bonagor, Jeff Henry, and Diane Freeman. Thank you all for being here. Did I miss anybody? In honor of International Women's Day, the Women's Leadership Committee, organized through KW Chamber, is pleased to recognize the young women here today who are enrolled in local high schools. And I think I warned most of them. As MC, it's just a perk of the job. I get to embarrass you, so I would ask all the students in attendance to please stand. So I know we have some from elementary school too. If you would stand. Sit down. You are an impressive group, and today's breakfast is really about you. It's about the people who come after us and the changes we can make, so that someday some of you will be on this stage and leading businesses and high-tech companies and joining the police force and providing leadership there. Every year there is an award given out by the Chamber of Commerce for the leaders of tomorrow. The winner of the 2019 International Women's Day Leader of Tomorrow Award is Hannah Valley from Blue Vale Collegiate Institute. And I would ask Hannah if you would please come to the stage. Hannah is an honor roll student who has achieved 95% average in grade 12. She has received numerous awards for her academic abilities and leadership skill. She is the executive president of ECA Association of Blue Vale. Is that environmental? Is that what the E is? Oh, DECA. Okay. Oh, it's business. All right. Leader of DECA. And she's also leading the federal provincial government simulation team at her high school. She is a true leader and an intellect and gives back to her community. Thank you for all you do for our community, Hannah. And I have this already framed beautiful certificate to give you. Hannah is the oldest of 4 children, and I asked her how her siblings felt because I think you set the bar pretty high as the oldest child. I now have the pleasure of introducing you to this morning's speakers, and I would ask them to come to the stage as I call their name. Joining us today is Lauren Lake, Shirley Hilton, and Lilica Beck. Lauren Lake is a structural engineering graduate from the University of Western Ontario, has always had an interest in how new technologies can improve efficiency and productivity through traditional industries. In 2012, along with Mallory Brody, she founded Bridget, a software company focused on building mobile-first software for on-site construction teams. Today, Bridget's software product is used by thousands across the United States and Canada. Lauren is a frequent speaker at industry events focused on construction innovation, and along with her business partner, Mallory Brody, was named Entrepreneur of the Year, was listed in the CIX Top 20 Company, and most recently named Top 30 Under 30 by Forbes. Lauren, do you have siblings? Because you set the bar pretty high, too. Since joining the Waterloo Regional Police Services in 1990, Acting Deputy Chief Shirley Hilton has served in a broad variety of roles. While assigned to the drug branch, she identified an organizational and community need for change in the way drug files and cases were assigned and investigated. It was her leadership style that guided the change towards creating a predictive, intelligent threat assessment tool to identify investigative needs strategically. With the assistance of the intelligence unit, cases were assigned based on safety, community impact, and viability of information. A personal focus for Acting Deputy Chief Hilton is mentorship and succession planning of future leaders within the organization. In 2016, she assisted in organizing and facilitated the first Women in Leadership Forum. She now is a member of the steering committee created to deliver future forums and deliver a formal mentorship program. Additionally, she is currently mentors members within the organization to provide guidance and coaching as succession-ready leaders. Acting Deputy Hilton holds a certificate from Dalhousie University in Police Leadership and Management Development and a diploma in Law and Security Administration from Fanshawe. Welcome. Lalika Beck is the VP of Marketing for Unitron, a hearing solution brand and part of the leading hearing care community, Sonona. Over the last 10 years, she has worked with commercial and R&D partners to develop, market, and launch hearing solutions to people with hearing loss. Lalika graduated with a Bachelor of Economics and Masters of International Business in her home country of Australia and spent her early career in banking and financial services. She moved to Canada 2.5 years ago and is passionate about developing and delivering the most personalized hearing solution in the market, where the consumer experience is paramount. When she's not working at Unitron's global strategy, Lalika dreams of stretching out in a Muskoka chair in one of Canada's Great Lakes with her husband, 2 daughters, and well-loved dogs. I'm sorry we don't have Muskoka chairs for you today. So the first question that I'm going to ask each of you to answer is, was following your career path a conscious decision? And can you share with us how you decided to pursue the path you took? Yes, microphones are in order. And Shirley, would you like to go first? They're on? Okay, I think they're on now.
I figured if I was sitting close enough to you, I'd be the first one to go. So I was anticipating that. My career path has not gone the way I had planned it. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a police officer since I was a very young child. My sister can attest to that. I can tell you a story, in which I will. As a young child, she decided that shoplifting would be a good thing to do. She stole some gifts. She had very good intention, but she stole some gifts for my mom for Mother's Day and was very proudly showing those gifts at home to me. And I was wise to the fact that she had no money because she didn't have a job and she was young. So I was mortified that she had done that, and I marched her right back to the WOCO. So anybody in the room that knows WOCO, marched her right back to the WOCO store and made her return the items, not even aware of the fact that we could probably be caught returning the items and get in trouble that way. So I always knew I wanted to be a police officer. However, I didn't appreciate or know how my career would go. I did want to be a canine officer, and that didn't occur. And I'm happy it didn't occur, because then I wouldn't have spent the 13 years in investigations, which was a clear passion for me. Once I started to develop a skill in interviewing and interrogation and just solving cases and having the ability and teamwork to solve cases, and which has opened doors to where I am right now.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad you didn't watch CSI. I'm sure they didn't have it back then. Your story is much more personal and more compelling. Lalika?
Well, for me, I mean, it took me the longest time to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. I had no idea for a long time, but I knew what sort of work environment I really enjoyed, and I really enjoyed working in places that where I got to wear multiple hats. There was a sense of pace and agility in the organization. So I sort of followed, didn't matter which industry, but I followed that kind of work environment. So consequently, I worked across a number of industries, financial services and banking, IT, and now hearing health. But it was about 10 years ago that I joined healthcare, particularly hearing health. And I have to say that's when I had an aha moment, because this industry is this beautiful combination of innovation and technology, and all the pace that comes with that, and then this ability to actually do something that impacts people's lives. And that combination is what I really enjoy. And so once I joined Sonova and had that aha moment and knew I had found the industry I wanted to be in, then I became very intentional about my career. I really started to look at which functional areas I want to be a part of, who are the people I need to know and network with in order to grow my career here, and really became intentional about voicing my ambition within the organization. So yeah, so 10 years in and I'm still really enjoying it.
So for me, I never would have pictured that I'm doing what I'm doing today. So I think it was just kind of following a path that presented itself as we got further along. So when I went to school, I was studying civil engineering. I didn't have any business background, but I always, I think in the back of my head, wanted to start a company at some point. I just had this kind of passion for that idea, but at the time I just didn't really feel like it was possible. And then I ended up hearing about this entrepreneurship program that was being run in Toronto, and if you applied to it, they would take students from all different backgrounds, and the idea was to find kids with this entrepreneurial spirit and give them some startup capital and some things to get a business off the ground. And so that's actually how I met my business partner. And so we started the company as we were still university students. We were doing this on the side while we were finishing up our final year of school. And then we continued working on it throughout the summer, and we both had other jobs lined up for if it didn't work out. And so we kept saying, okay, if we can't get this to kind of take off by the end of the summer, then we'll both go and take our other jobs and we'll kind of move on. And so that was kind of the line in the sand that we had set for ourselves, and we got to the end of the summer and we just knew we wanted to keep going, and so we've been just continuing on that ever since we graduated. So I think it was just, there was no like specific plan in place, and it wasn't really what I pictured ever happening, but I think it was just finding an opportunity and going with it and kind of making the most of it.
And I did give the panelists questions beforehand, but I guess I'm going to take sort of the prerogative of the MC. Lauren, one of the things that has always engaged me, and it's because I have a long line of entrepreneurs in my immediate family, do you think that being an entrepreneur is something that's sort of innate, or can it be cultivated? How did you recognize in yourself that you were entrepreneurial?
I don't think I did recognize it because I was in school, and I think I did have that entrepreneurial spirit kind of buried maybe in me, but I just kept thinking about it as, oh, to start a business, you have to have a business degree, and that's not what I've done, so what am I going to do? And so I kept thinking, well, that's okay, I'll go do something else, and maybe 10 or 15 years down the road. For some reason, I just thought that some light bulb at some point would go off, and I would just know what to do. And so I kept putting it off, just saying, well, maybe later on down the road, I'll be, more equipped, or I'll have this or that. And so I think it was, for me, I think I did have that probably within me somewhere, but I almost had to convince myself that I was capable of it. And at the time, I just kept coming up with these excuses of why I wouldn't be able to, or why I didn't have the prerequisites. So yeah, so I don't have any business education. I took one business class, I think, in high school, and that's about it.
Well, the light bulb clearly went off because you shine very brightly. Monica, I'm going to ask you to start with this next question. What was the biggest challenge that you faced in achieving your goals? You've been really articulate about identifying them.
I think for me, actually, it was very much about being a mom and trying to grow my career. I just remember there were days where I said to my husband, I think other people are raising our children, right? And I remember an instance where for the third week in a row I was called to daycare because my daughter was sick, and I arrived in my heels and my suit, and I was standing amongst all these toys and babies and just bawling. And and I know so many of you probably have similar experiences, that balance of being a mom and trying to build your career. But I knew that working really energized me. I really thrived in a work environment. It's something I wanted to do, so it was about persevering, and telling yourself it's okay to make that choice, and then having a really great support network. I mean, I could never have done it without my mother, who stepped in so many times, and also without my husband, that was very, very supportive through it. So, you know, there's been different challenges with building my career within an organisation, but I would say just building a career in total, that balance has been very tricky.
So I've always noticed in really high achieving people and sort of in my personal life, I don't know that work-life balance exists. Do you think it does?
No, I think you've got to be okay with that, with the fact that it doesn't exist. And it'll be different for everybody, right? And some days it'll feel good, and some days it really won't.
I totally agree. I usually use the expression, some days the wheels just fall off everything. Thank you. Shirley, biggest challenge?
Biggest challenge, I think, is the negative self-talk in my head, sometimes like related to, and I'll use the term imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome as, oh my gosh, how did I get here and how did I trick everybody? Again, how on earth did I manage to successfully get through this promotional process and fool them? There's so many other people that are far better than I am. And I'll use my current situation right now as the acting deputy chief. When certainly I learned of that appointment, I had some serious self-doubt and was beating myself up considerably about my colleagues. What about my colleagues? They're tremendous individuals who are skilled and can do the job. And I was in my own head explaining to myself all the reasons that I didn't deserve the job rather than all the reasons I did deserve the job. So the biggest challenge for me is this whole imposter syndrome, and I do make fun of it because it is, and we all have it. We all have the moments of self-doubt, or where we think we compare ourselves to other people and their career path and their education and where their station in life is. And you know, all in all, you have to stop comparing yourself, and you have to put your shoulders back and raise your head and say, I deserve to be here. And it took, and I have a great support system as well. And when Lilka was talking about the balance, the work-life balance, I would agree the wheels do fall off. And but you have to have those supports in place, and I certainly did have those supports in place. And my family, incredibly supportive, as are my co-workers and allies within the organization as well. But yeah, my biggest challenge sometimes is myself.
Do you think that imposter syndrome, and there's probably nobody in the room that doesn't relate to that on some level, is exacerbated by the fact that you're a woman in what has traditionally been a male-dominated profession?
Definitely. I would have to say that a lot of it is, and I'll again say that through the ranks as I've been promoted and through the different areas that I've worked, inevitably what comes out of some people's mouths, not all, but some people's mouths, is she got that position or she got that promotion because she's a woman. And so that is always something that's resonating in my head, because it's one of those things, did I get it because I'm a woman? Or are people seeing my skill and my ability to do the job? And that's often what you women, you, me, want people to see me for my skill, to see me for who I am and see my achievements, and not because I'm just a woman, and not just a woman, a woman.
Lauren, biggest challenge in achieving your goals?
So I think overall one of our biggest challenges is probably also one of our biggest attributes in a way, is just that we haven't done this before. So we have never started a company. This is our first go at it. So I think in a lot of ways that's a huge challenge, because we're learning everything as we go and we're just flying by the seat of our pants and we really have no idea what's around the corner. But then I think at the same time that's actually very valuable in some ways, because almost having that naive kind of optimism I think helps us, and has helped us in the past, keep going when times have definitely been rough, and so I think maybe had we been a little bit more experienced and a little bit more hardened, we may have given up earlier on. But I think because we just don't really know what the next step is, I think that in some ways kind of keeps us, I guess keeps our spirits high and keeps us pushing.
It's great. Often successful people, you may clap. Often successful people have had help along the way, a mentor, an investor, or a champion. Did you have anyone that fits this description, and can you talk to us about how they helped? And I think we'll start with Shirley.
What I will say is I've had allies, I've had mentors, and I certainly have had a sponsor along the way. A specific career mentor I've never had, but I've had mentors who have mentored me through particular skills or particular areas within the organization. So periods of time that I would have certain mentors that would help me along the way. I have a number of allies, and the allies are the men within the organization and the women within the organization who do value the work that I do and speak on my behalf. And I do have a sponsor, and I'm not going to say this because he's sitting in the room. My sponsor would be, who I consider my sponsor is Chief Larkin. He is one who has seen my value and has provided me with some opportunities within the organization. He is very progressive and a visionary, and has seen that I am part of that vision. But I know it's not that he had provided these opportunities without some hard work on my behalf for those opportunities to exist. So when I talk about being my sponsor, my rank or my promotions within the senior leadership team, he's been my sponsor for that. And my allies, and I look to the table as well. It sits over at table number 9, and that's an incredible table of allies. I have Deputy Chief Baylor sitting there, who is a tremendous ally for me currently in this role. And I have a tremendous table of supportive civilian professionals and senior leaders sitting at the table. And I can't do it without a group of supportive people.
Shirley, one of the things, and I'm going to apologize to the table over here when I said I wasn't going to talk about the Prime Minister's Task Force on Women Entrepreneurs, which was back in 2002. I was part of a group that went right across Canada and internationally, and one of the things that we landed on was that mentorship needed to be deliberate, and it had a exponentially more effective effect for women than it did in men, because men tend to mentor other young men coming up through the ranks. You know, they go play poker, they play golf, they have a game of squash. Women generally are trying to balance that work-life balance. If they have a family, they're running home, going to daycare, Lilica, if your kid is sick. And it needed to be very intentional. It's a very big part of what you're doing now. Can you just talk for a minute about your aha moment or why you feel it needs to be so intentional?
Definitely. You hit it when you said mentorship. I mean, it has to be deliberate and it has to be intentional. We do have informal mentors and mentorship, obviously, within the organization, and probably many of you have mentors informally, but in order to make change, because mentors will seek out mentees who are much like themselves. So in order to make change, we have to be very intentional. We have to be very deliberate, or we will never make change. So everybody has that opportunity to have a mentor or to be menteed. And what we've done, my aha moment was back in 2000, I believe it was 2015, a colleague and I went to the Women Leadership Institute in Vancouver, and during that there was a whole lot of chatter about mentors and mentorship, and I was sitting there going, I never had that, and I was kind of being a bit, I didn't get that, until I went, okay, so you didn't get it, you didn't have it, so what? Why aren't you a mentor? Why aren't you mentoring? And that aha moment came back to the organization where with Penny Swiley, who's sitting here, our champion, but certainly not without Chief Larkin's vision about having a Women in Leadership forum, a Women in Leadership specific forum where only the women within the organization get together and discuss what are our challenges, what are our roadblocks, how can we help one another instead of being our worst enemies sometimes. I mean, sometimes women are other women's worst enemies, in policing especially, because sometimes it's very competitive. It's competitive to get positions. It's competitive to be looked in transfer capacity. So we were very intentional on our very first Women in Leadership forum that as much as it appeared, and it was challenging at times, to exclude men, we had to have the honest, courageous conversation with our women within the organization to find out what are their challenges, what are our challenges, how can we benefit from this particular forum to move forward and make a change. And so we have had, just recently, and I don't want to take up any more time on this, but we recently had our third Women in Leadership conference, and definitely the last two have been open up to the men, because we know that we need the men within the organization to be our allies to make a change. So I'm very proud of the fact that we've done this for 3 years in a row.
Thank you for a lot of nodding. Lauren, champions, investors.
So for us, I think there's been so many people since we first started the company 5 years ago. So it's been a range of people from investors, people that have put money into our company and have helped us along the way. But also a lot of it has come from this region, and that's really why we moved here. So we didn't actually start the company here in KW. We both were Western graduates, so we technically started while we were in school in London, and then we were in Toronto for a few months. And we moved here kind of on a whim, really not knowing anyone, but just having heard so many positive things about the community here, especially for the smaller tech companies. We'd heard great things about Communitech and all of the work that they do to support the smaller companies in town. And so we just said, well, let's go there. And so we came here, knowing nobody, and we knocked on Communitech's door and we said, we're here, what do we do next? And so there's been so much support that has been given to us through the community here, through other companies, through other founders, people that have done this before and shared their experience and have helped us along the way. And so I think it's our time now to give back to the companies kind of coming up behind us. And there's so many programs in place here in town to help kind of foster that relationship. And I think that's really unique, and that definitely stands out as one of the benefits of being here in the region. And I know there's tons of other companies that are from out of town, and they hear about KW and they immediately kind of have heard of that, or they know that that's kind of the environment that is here. So I think that's, for us, has helped really kind of build those relationships and have the support system around us.
One of the, you acknowledge the high school students here, and I know that high tech is often thought of as something for young people. Excuse me. Was your youth, did you ever feel that was an impediment or an additional challenge to you moving forward with your vision?
Sorry, you just mean the technology of it? Or
being taken seriously by investors? And,
because we were young?
Yeah.
Yes, so that was definitely, so we were two young female entrepreneurs, first time doing this, and our product, so what we do is construction technology, and we always joke that that's like the two most male-dominated industries, colliding. So I think early on we really did have a hard time with that. We would go to talk to an investor and we would say, here we are, we want to revolutionize, the construction industry through technology. And they're kind of like, okay. And so I think it was hard, and to no fault of any of the investors, but I think a lot of the time they're kind of looking for what they know. And because there's not that many female entrepreneurs in construction technology, they weren't really able to match it to say, oh, you know what, Lauren and Mallory really remind me of these other two that, you know, I invested in 10 years ago, and look at how successful that's been. So this kind of, you know, seems to be going on that same path. There wasn't really that connection, and we always joked, you know, they were used to seeing these guys show up in hoodies, and that was not what we were. And so I think it was hard to place us and to kind of wrap their heads around where we were going to fit in. And so that was really frustrating at first, because we felt like we weren't kind of getting, I guess, the investment that other companies that had, you know, the same revenue, the same milestones, they were, you know, getting more investment than we were, and that felt very unfair. But we kind of, you know, just kind of dealt with our feelings, I guess, first. We said, you know what, this is unfair, but like, what are we going to do about it? And we decided in that moment, like, the only thing that the investors, you know, they can have all the biases and whatever in their head, the only thing they can't argue with are the numbers. And so all we're going to do is just outperform any of the other companies. And once it's on paper, like, no one can argue with that. They can say, well, this or that, or, you know, they can come up with all these reasons, but if we can really prove it, then what are they going to say? And so we had this goal at the time to be a high-performing tech company of our stage. You had to hit 20% growth month over month. And so we drew this thing on, we worked out of a basement apartment at the time. We drew on the wall this like 20% kind of thermometer, kind of like what charities do when they're raising funds. And every month we would color it in as we grew our revenue, and we would, like, every single month without fail, we would hit that 20%, even when it came down to like the last moment, and it was exhausting and it was not sustainable. But we did that for so many months that we were able to go back to those investors and say, like, here you go. Here's the sales numbers, here's the metrics we told you 6 months ago we were going to hit, and here it is. And that's what kind of showed the traction, and that's how we were able to get that investment. It's still a challenge today, even though we've been around for a longer time. And so it still feels unfair at times, but I think it's just, we keep kind of telling ourselves, if we can kind of prove this out, then the people, you know, 10 years ago, if there's 2 more female founders that do something similar, then maybe those investors will think, oh, we invested in this company, Bridget, and that worked, and so, you know, maybe we can kind of set that pattern. So that's kind of how we flip it to make it more of an optimistic outlook, instead of just making, I guess, making it feel unfair all the time.
Your champion investor, mentor?
I think my champions there that I want to tell you about are a little closer to home. So 2 really great champions that have supported my personal journey. One is my husband, who actually gave up his career, a really good career, to leave Australia, the bottom of the world, and come up to Canada, the top of the world, and follow me here. And I think that's just amazing. And the other key champion is actually my dad, who I didn't recognize this until a few years ago, but I'm one of 3 girls in an ethnic family. I was born in Dubai, in the Middle East, a country, particularly at that time, that didn't have a lot of opportunity for women and women who weren't citizens of the country. And my dad decided to leave and find another country to live in because he had 3 daughters, and he wanted us to have opportunity. If one of us wanted to be a neurosurgeon, we should be able to be a neurosurgeon. None of us turned out to be neurosurgeons. But the opportunity was there, and, you know, immigrating to another country is a big decision. It's really hard. It was hard for my mom. I know now, because I've immigrated to Canada, I've had a much better experience than he did, because I had some great help from Hildy, who I think is here.
Hildy is here. Wave, Hildy.
She helped me and my family get here. But, you know, he made a lot of sacrifices for his career, and they left all their friends for us 3 girls to have this opportunity. And I remember growing up, he would always send me these articles about women in leadership positions, and I never appreciated or even got it then. But he would say, look at this Indian woman, she's the CEO of Pepsi, and, you know, and he would send me these articles. And it's only in the last few years that I really recognized that really shaped my attitude towards it's possible. As a woman, as an ethnic woman, it is possible. And I think that's really helped me forge my career.
I've always observed that if you want to turn any man into a feminist, it sure he has a daughter. A father of a daughter becomes a feminist. I'm going to stick with you, Lalika. What's the advice you'd give a younger you? If you were back where you were starting out and you know what you know now, what would your advice be to yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the advice I'd like to give is that every journey is different. I think there's a lot of pressure, again, as a woman, or if there's cultural pressure, or depending on your circumstances, how you should live your life, what choices you should make, in what order. So for me, moving out of home before I got married, well, there was a lot of pressure there, I can tell you. Choosing to be a career woman over a homemaker, there was pressure. And then now becoming the breadwinner of the family, right? In my extended family, there's some opinions on that too. So, not from my dad, but my extended family. So, I think the truth is everyone's journey is different, and in some ways everyone's journey is the same. There's ups and downs, there's challenges and opportunities. But you've just got to do it the way you want to do it, and people get used to it. They get used to it.
Thank you. Shirley, what would you tell younger Shirley?
I would tell a younger me that my parents instilled my values. My values are aligned with the organization in which I work in, but value yourself and stay true to yourself. In policing, there is a culture, and certainly when I was hired, the culture is we wear a uniform. That's what we do. That makes us recognizable. But that uniform represents the work in which I do, but it doesn't represent Shirley. So I don't need to assimilate. I need to assimilate and be part of the police culture, but I don't need to assimilate and be a man or like a man. I'm a woman, and I said this before, and obviously I am, but I am a woman, and I celebrate that, and I continue to celebrate that, and I'm not embarrassed to be one. And we have to remember that with being a woman, we bring some difference to a table. We bring a different voice to the table sometimes, and it might not be exactly what the rest of our colleagues are thinking or saying, but we're bringing something different, and different is good, because different means we're open-minded. We can develop different things or come up with different ideas or different ways of doing things. And so celebrating all of our differences around the table and making sure that I speak up when I have something to say and not wait to be asked if I have something to say. So that is what I would say to a younger Shirley.
I think for me, I would tell myself not to worry so much about having this very rigid career plan ahead of time, and I think that was something when I think back to myself in university or even in high school, I definitely worried about that a lot because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had gone to school to study engineering. I loved it, but it didn't really feel right in terms of taking an engineering job after school. But there was so much pressure to, what's your plan? What do you want to do in 10 years? How are you going to get there? And I remember just feeling so overwhelmed by that and just so many sleepless nights thinking, everyone else has a plan, I don't know what I want, and maybe what I want isn't the same thing as what everyone else is wanting to do. And so I feel like I shouldn't have worried so much about that, and in some ways I'm glad I didn't have such a plan in place because I think that kept me really open to just finding opportunities and going with opportunities as they presented themselves. So I think it's nice to have some idea of what interests you or what you get excited about, but just not having to feel like you're, setting your life, 10 or 15 years down the road and you have to follow everything as it goes. I never thought I would be in business. My mom made me take a high school business class and I fought her on it and told her I never wanted to be in business. I didn't think I was going to be in construction. There's just so many things that I never would have predicted early on that ended up interesting me more than I thought they would as a student. So I think I would just tell myself, be open-minded and just take opportunities as they come and make the most of them.
So, Lauren, Bridget software is produced and used by thousands across the United States and Canada. You're a frequent speaker at industry events and focused on construction innovation, along with your business partner, Mallory Brody. You were named Entrepreneur of the Year. Most recently named top 30 under 30 by Forbes. What's next?
So Bridget's continuing to grow. We're still looking at the construction industry. We're still trying to find problems that we can address, and I think that's really the core of how the business got started. I studied civil engineering, so I had spent my summers working on construction sites, which at the time I just saw as a summer job and a way to kind of understand the industry that I was in a little bit more and make some money for school. I didn't realize how much of an impact it would have later on, and that I would, get to learn the industry as much as I did. So that's kind of how the construction angle came up, and then we both, Mallory and myself, both have family in construction, so we kind of got interested in it right away. But the way that we started the business was we had this idea that technology really should be applied to the construction site. It was surprising to us that every site that I had been on as a student, everyone was using clipboards and pen and paper and post-it notes, and these were multi-million-dollar massive skyscraper projects, and they were all operating off pen and paper. And so we said, this is crazy, like everyone else is using their smartphone, and here we are on these $100 million plus projects, and it's post-it notes. Like, what's going on here? And so we started the company, we called it crane hunting at the time, but pretty much we just drove around looking for cranes. And we would see a crane off in the distance, and we would just drive in that direction until we ended up eventually on this site. And we would get out of our car, and we were in university at the time, and we would just show up on the site at 6:30 in the morning while everyone was showing up. And sometimes we'd bring Timbits with us or coffees or whatever, and we'd say to anyone on the site, do you have 2 minutes to talk? And we would just talk to site supers, architects, engineers, consultants, whoever was on the job, we wanted to talk to them. And we just kept asking, what is frustrating about your job? What could we do to help you? Is it something to do with this or that? And we just found that people, when given the chance, love to complain. And we definitely made the most of that. And so people just started venting about all of these problems, how frustrated they were, and we were just really, I think, empathetic and listened and took so many notes, and we did this 500 times. So we visited 500 sites before we even built our product. And that was really what led us to build the product that we have today, was just understanding what the needs of the users were and kind of building for that. So that's a long story, all to say that we're continuing that process, even though we're now a bit of a bigger company. So we actually have a new product launching today, March 1st. So the new product is different than our first product. Our first product was really focused on the construction site, how we could help trades and general contractors communicate around quality control, something that they did all manually. So that was our first product. The second product is focused a bit more at the office level within a construction company, and it's around what they call resource planning. So it's how they allocate all the different site personnel to all of the different jobs. So it would be something designed for the larger general contractors, people that have hundreds or thousands of projects where they right now are tracking that all in Excel spreadsheets, and they are manually moving hundreds or thousands of people constantly from project to project with no insight as to what's going on or what their utilization rate is of their staff. So we're just continuing to ask questions, continuing to build products, and grow the team.
Lalika, you've worked at Sonova for over 10 years, and the focus is on consumer experience, providing the most personalized hearing solution on the market. This is a really high standard and focused on the individual. How do you integrate this value when you're working on a global strategy?
Yeah, I often say to my team that in our industry we sell a product that nobody wants, right? We sell hearing aids, and unfortunately, because of the stigma attached to hearing loss, we have a very reluctant buyer. Yet, for so long, we've had this mantra in this industry of build it and they will come. And and then we wonder why we haven't really moved the needle on the penetration rate. And I think it's because we haven't had enough empathy, which is a word you use, used. And that's a big shift now happening in our industry and particularly in our organisation in order to drive this customer centricity, that we start with empathy with the consumer. And we also use the empathy a lot just in our personal interactions in the office, you know, so that we also integrate it just in the way we work together. And so some team members and I recently worked with a company called The Zone, where we talked a lot about how do you bring your whole self to work. You know, we're so used to bringing our brains and maybe our instincts to work, but we forget to bring our heart and our feeling into the discussion. I'm sure there's a lot of great literature about bringing your whole self to work. And that has been an amazing step forward in building empathy, not only as we're developing products and policies and programs, but just in the way we interact with each other. You know, when someone's disengaged in a meeting or frustrated, when you're bringing your heart into the conversation, it's just such a different outcome. You look at it differently. So personally, that's how I integrate into the way I work. But for us as an organisation, it's really about understanding the customer and beginning with that empathy.
Thank you. So Shirley, you've served in several distinct capacities as a member of Waterloo Regional Police Service. Which one was the most rewarding as you look back on your career, or forward on your career?
It's so hard to answer that question. I think every day if you ask me that question, I'd probably provide a different answer, because there's been so many great experiences and rewards throughout my career, because I've worked in patrol and general investigations. I've worked in homicide, worked with good golly, our drug branch. I'm trying to think of where I've worked. And generally, I think I'm going to speak very generally here about what the reward is. And generally, it's a people-focused reward. And the people-focused reward, I'll tell you one story that resonates with me and still resonates with me. When my very first case, when I was a detective, was an abuse case, and interviewed a couple of children and laid a charge, but there were some peripheral children that needed to be interviewed as well. So one of the young people that I interviewed, I suspected was a victim of abuse. I never had disclosure, and moved on and from that particular investigation, but kept running into this particular youth. And this youth I would run into because he was committing break-and enters, he was involved in petty theft and involved in drugs. And I would have to arrest him based on the crime that he had committed. And I had a fairly decent relationship with his parents as well. And every time I saw him, I would remind him of our very first encounter, and that if you ever need to talk, here's my card. Always gave his parents my card if he ever needs to talk. 10 years later, he called me and was ready to disclose what had occurred to him, and he had my card still. So I was able to connect him with our major case unit and have that interview done. But that was so very impactful for me, because what I take away is it's not what we do, it's the impact that we leave on people. And that to me was one of my biggest rewards that I can think of right now. And then internally, what is happening within the organization, the rewards, and I go back to the impact. It's not what you do, but it's the impact you leave. And certainly, I've had a number of younger officers. We had our Women in Leadership Forum just last month. We had our forum, and I was one of the speakers at the forum as well, and a number of officers approached me after the fact and said, "Do you remember when you told me this? Do you remember when this happened?" And I didn't realize the impact, because I know there's allies out there, and I know there's individuals that I have I've become a role model for. I know that now. I didn't see it as it was happening, and it's quite it's very uplifting to know that the impact has been made and that I will hopefully continue to make.
Thank you. I think we've hit another one out of the park, and I'm going to ask at this time, if you ladies just stay there, Julie Barker-Mertz, Senior Vice President of BMO Bank of Montreal, our title sponsor, to come and formally thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, three incredible role models. We are thrilled to be sponsors of the event today, and after all, we are the Bank for Women. And I would like to formally thank our panelists, Lauren, Shirley, and Malika, for inspiring us this morning. It's early to get us all up and out. And I'm always the first to say, make it to the breakfast. Get there at 7 o'clock, and I promise you, you will leave inspired. And I'm certainly thrilled to have heard from all three of you. When I think of leading with empathy and changing lives, you've all had such an impact already, and I'm sure everybody in the audience today is going to take something meaningful away. And in particular, the tables at the back, some young women who are going to trailblaze, I'm sure, as a result of what they've heard today. In fact, we are approaching International Women's Day. Karen mentioned that. We are a week away, and it's great to be able to kick it off with this event. And this year is an opportunity for us to set a baseline of education with our employee population at BMO, with our social followers and the public at large, around the health and the growth of the global economy would be strengthened if we move toward closing the gap in gender equality, some of which we heard this morning, especially, I suggest, in the police force, as well as on construction sites. For companies and industries to grow, we need a leadership table that benefits from diverse perspectives. It's our interest that women and girls feel they have the potential to hold roles as advisors and belong at the boardroom table, so that business community can benefit from the innovation that stems from diversity and leverages the full potential of women in our businesses. At BMO, we've seen the power of investing in women. We lead our competitors in the representation of women in our leadership ranks, with 40% of women in senior roles in Canada and in the US. And for decades, we have been deeply committed to supporting women entrepreneurs with capital allocated directly to women. Our involvement in organizations like Grow Your Biz, Move the Dial, Women Get on Board, and the Women's Presidents Organization are just naming a few of where we provide a tangible way for BMO to connect our experiences and knowledge with business leaders and innovators. Today, we are actually releasing on Twitter an interactive quiz with the goal of contributing to the conversation about how much farther we have to go to reach gender equality. So I encourage you all to visit BMO on Twitter, join the conversation, and let us know what you think. It's a short quiz, and I think you'll find it really interesting. This is just a taste of who we are, how we're committed to the communities we serve, and why I can say with confidence that we are the Bank for Women, and we mean business. In fact, if you have time to stick around, we have a few tables of business leaders who would love your business. So thank you again for this incredible, inspiring morning to kick us off into the week of International Women's. I think we should start calling it International Women's Week now. And eventually every day will be International Women's Day. So thank you again. Congratulations to all of you for your success, and I wish you all the best in all your future endeavors. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Julie. And again, remember you heard it here first. Go on Twitter and take that quiz. I would now like to introduce Marina Garabedian from Rafi Jewelers. Today's jewelry sponsor is a little something for each of our speakers. Wow, I got one this year. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you, Marina. Personally, thank you too. The Chamber hosts several events over the years specifically for women in business and entrepreneurs. Watch the website for their upcoming event in May. Mark your calendars for the 13th annual Inspiring Women event to be held on Thursday, September the 26th. Please hand in your business card at the registration desk to get an email list of the events. They sell out quickly, and we would love to have you join us. Thank you again to BMO, Bank of Montreal, Hefner Lexus and Toyota, Wilfrid Laurier University, Studio Locale, Meridian Credit Union, Raffi Jewelers, Westmount Sign and Printing, and Leslie Warren Design Group for sponsoring this morning's breakfast. And a special thank you to Inn of Waterloo. And I know it's their job, but I really want to give a shout out to Ian McLean and the staff at the Chamber of Greater Kitchener-Waterloo. You do a great job. And finally, thank you for joining us today and celebrating the successes and the collaboration of women in our community. I hope one way or another you were inspired by all of the conversations that were shared today. Please grab a Modalina magazine on your way out and enjoy the day. And thank you for Rogers for telecasting this as well. Have a great day.